Governance, Technology, and Participative Democracy by Goran Buldioski. Principal investigator of the Hertie School in Berlin and member of the European Council on Foreign Relations. He's always worked on creating a more participative democracy in Europe, and he has a long-standing experience in the Open Society Foundations.
De la Hertie School de Berlín y miembro del Consejo Europeo de Relaciones Exteriores, dedica su trayectoria a construir una Europa más democrática y participativa. Con casi 2 décadas liderando proyectos en la Open Society Foundations, confirma que solo uniendo la sociedad civil con la política y la academia se puede construir un futuro justo. Sus análisis aparecen en medios como Foreign Policy, Político o Dizit, donde defiende un nuevo modelo de gobernanza en el que la democracia en Europa sea realmente de todos. Su visión estratégica y su capacidad para tender puentes le convierten en una voz clave para el debate europeo.
Good morning to everybody. Physical attendance, digital attendance. It's a privilege for me to interview Goran. Welcome, Goran. I must say that this conversation will be less about technology and a bit more about policy, big policy. This will be a very high-level conversation. Please don't miss any word, any concept. When I talk to Goran, in some way I feel like if I were speaking with a ghost, or better, with a survivor. Because Goran was born in a nation which doesn't exist anymore. Goran was born in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia disappeared under the war, under the chaos, under the unattendance of the European institutions. And I feel fear when I think that the history used to repeat. Do you think, Goran, that we have learned the lessons of the past?
First, thank you for having me here, and in a way it's true. I will try to take you at a sort of a 10,000-meter view to look a bit the broader picture, because often when we hear the grassroots level initiative, something that I really, for 19 years, I worked in Open Society Foundations, and day in, day out, we were supporting thousands of various organizations across the continent. I was in charge of our European work. And, you know, if you ask whether we learned our lessons, you know, the answer will be, you know, the Germans like to say Jein. So ja and nein. You know, we Europeans, we're very funny creatures. You know, we always grandiose ourselves, but actually we most of the time people grandiose themselves not even as Europeans, but as Germans, as French and whatnot. So actually, if I look at Germany, there's a lot of learning that happens in Germany, or France, or elsewhere, Italy, Spain. But then when I ask myself, do we learn from the other? Unfortunately, the answer is no. For example, I've always been really in awe about Spain and the way how you do things really left of center. And I felt in the rest of Europe, very little has been learned about that. So I have to say, in this respect, no, and in some other respects, actually, maybe we can put the first picture. I think things have gone a bit worse. The picture is actually, you saw it yesterday. You saw it yesterday. That's a photo of next to my bed. Monique mentioned it. There's a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And actually, you know, when Jaime said, I would like to take you at sort of at the upper stratosphere, I really invite you to think not only of this as a piece of paper or declaration. I really ask you to think, okay, what happens with you as individuals and how you can create your opinion independently. So in this case, I think we learned, but now we need to have a different learning. What do I mean by this? Look at this gadget. This gadget is probably recording me right now. When you look at the laptop, when you look at the phone, most of the time, very likely, legally or illegally, most of the time in European Union illegally, they're recording you. But it's not about recording. Also, they look at your physiology. And I ask you to think, if you think in the human rights context, one of the key features of actually liberal democracy and human rights is an individual who is able independently to create their opinion. If this and many other gadgets are actually looking at my physiology and then prompting me what they want me to buy, say, think, then the other, can we have the fundaments of the human rights that we're thinking? And I really invite you to think in that context. This is not to fearmonger, this is not to scare, but it's really to say that we have to consider these questions much more fundamentally, because actually they influence us as human beings. It's not only about us getting knowledge, as we heard in the previous session, from the chatbots or from the large LLMs. It's also how that technology is actually manipulating us as never before.
Do you think, Goran, that European citizens are ready to have their own opinion and make their own decisions?
I mean, not that I think. I have worked with European citizens. I have worked with thousands of NGOs and many, many other people, including politicians. I think they have demonstrated, since the Second World War, they've demonstrated development of democracy. I mean, you guys here have a military dictatorship. That's not only here, Portugal, Greece. You mentioned Yugoslavia, it fell apart. I lived in Budapest for many years, in Hungary, that entered European Union. So actually, there is a very clear track record that the European population and the political and the economic elite has done well. But when I ask about the human rights, we have to ask ourselves now, okay, where is democracy? What does this technology does to our democracy? And are we in control of that, or we are not? That's why when you introduced me, I was like thinking about and looking at the sort of the bios and the talks of the other people. I thought, okay, a lot is spoken about technology, but I really want to talk about governance, and maybe more brutally, I want to talk about power and money.
As you told, you have lived in Budapest for some years. Do you think that Hungarian citizens deserve a prime minister like Viktor Orban?
Look, what worries me is not whether they deserve or not. What worries me is, do they have the ability to choose a prime minister based on their own opinion? And it worries me because, for example, in the last elections, the key opposition candidate had 5 minutes of airtime on the TV at 8 a.m. after a public national holiday. So what worries me is actually the government inside European Union, and this is all well documented already for a decade, has violated all the rule of law, has diminished the standards, has co-opted the, basically bought or really suppressed media. What worries me is that actually their people cannot create a opinion. But there's a positive thing if we talk about Hungary. People eventually, even if they're manipulated, there is life. There's that much that you can lie about life. If you are not well materially, if you're not well emotionally, if you're not well societally, there is a limit to lies. But here comes the question, do we have the power to change the world of life?
Okay, we will talk not only about life, but also about power, the power for life. Where does the power come from? Should we follow the money? Next picture, please.
Yeah, actually, you know who this guy is. Yeah, who's that guy? Bernard Arnault, the richest European. I opted to show you the richest European because actually it would have been very cheap to put you Elon Musk or Larry Ellison, who are competing who will be the richest person. They usually come from the world that you inhabit, meaning the technology world. But often, and I'm part of that world, I believe in that world, we talk about the power of the people. We talk about the power of the votes, elections, rigging or not, or fair elections in democracies and whatnot. But we should not forget the brutal power and the money. So bear with me for a second, because I really want to offer you an alternative analytical viewpoint, but also an action viewpoint. Why I show the picture of Bernard Arnault? I show it because, actually, to me, that's a very good thing to illustrate that in Europe, 50% of population owns 4% of the wealth. Let it sink a bit. 50%, the bottom 50% owns 4% of the wealth. The top 1% owns 1/4. The top 10% owns 68%. So actually, if we were voting by the power of money, and this is what's happening in your world of advocacy and lobbying, those 68% of the top 10 obviously have much bigger sway. Now, if you think that this is bad, let me share the numbers from the world. Oxfam report, the data before was basically from the Piketty and the World Inequality Index. We are talking about wealth. Europe is pretty good about income inequality, relatively good, but wealth is not. But if you look at the world, the 3,000 billionaires which we have right now own more than 95% of the global wealth combined. So I think so they own more than 95% of the population. Sorry. And this is a frame that I would like to offer. This is not to complain, but this is really to say, wait a second, what do we do about these people in power? How do we think about that? We're not powerless. Last year, Enrico Letta, there were three major reports commissioned by the European Commission. One of them was Enrico Letta. And suddenly, he dug up a bit European Central Bank, and he found that we Europeans are very rich. Even probably in your pocket you don't feel so, but we have 33 trillion euros on our disposal, 11 trillion of those on savings accounts sitting idle. And guess what? Most of this money, if it's invested not in Europe, it's invested in the United States. Around 300 billion every year. And the reason why I'm asking you to think is because if you think about money, and you're thinking like, oh, tariffs towards US, boo, that's really bad because actually our industry hurts. And that's true. If you produce something and you export it, if you're a wine producer from Spain and you export it to the United States as a big market, you suffer big time. But if you're a rich Spanish person belonging to 1%, actually your income is still coming very handsomely from your investments in the United States. And that's what I want to suggest. This is not to say that one is good, the other one is bad. But when we start thinking about the analysis of the entire ecosystem and the governance in which we would like to see a good artificial intelligence regulation, in which we would like to see a good technology for the benefit of all 100% of humankind, we should not neglect the power of money.
So, Goran, what can, next picture please, what can do normal people? What can we do? The people in this room, your family, my family, how can we fight against inequity? How we can fight against injustice? Do you know the flotilla action? Is the activism the way to fight? What do you think?
It is, but not like this. I took this photo ages ago, and it has been bothering me for a while. And now look, I gave you a bit of many of you, assuming that you're not part of the 1%, will see a bleak picture. I'm moving more towards what could be done. Look, this is cute, but this doesn't solve the problem. And actually, this is like, I myself, I consider myself more of a social democrat than a liberal. My world values are, different. And I have a lot of empathy for pro-democracy people. I even stopped calling them liberals because that's been tarnished as a brand. But, people who believe in democracy. And if we do this, oh, I have this car and I put a sticker and now it's all nice, I'm going to continue driving the car. No, things will not change. Things will not change because actually, while we are doing that, in my previous job, we saw how the radical right and people who really believe in a different worldview or have a different worldview and believe in world governed by authoritarian forces, they put the money where the mouth is. You ask me about Hungary. I work also in the world of think tanks. The richest think tank in continental Europe is in Hungary. they have 1.3 billion euros in endowment. Because the government, of course, they took a bit of taxpayers' money, they gave them buildings, but nevertheless, they have all the money in this world to do work. While the pro-democracy, liberal, progressive think tanks, ask them what they're doing. Like many of the NGOs here in the room, they're really struggling to get the next deal or the contract or the grant from the European Union. The private donors on their side will say, yeah, we believe in you, but when you ask, okay, can you support this work? Oh, I'll give you 10,000. And that's not good. And this sticker should mean like that, and this is something that we really have to think of what are the actionable ideas and where it will matter, including where sometimes it might hurt us in a short term.
Let's look forward. So actionable ideas. Next picture, please.
So, this is Oscar Dominguez, 2 blocks away from here in the Picasso Museum. I really warmly recommend you. Picasso exhibition is great. Oscar Dominguez is even more inspiring. This is his photo where we have the steam roller, and I hope you can see the small rose and the glass of water there. And actually, the steam roller is breaking in front of the rose. So if you still have time, for those who are not from Malaga, go and see it, really recommend. What do I want to make a point? Many of the activists, I would say, including, I consider myself as part of it, we know that even in the world there is an asymmetry of power, of money. Often, not only good ideas, but well-designed intervention and also well-thought-through action can break steam rollers. And at the moment, we have steam rollers. So, I spoke, and you saw the sticker about Elon Musk. For a long time among my peers, we were really debating, and I was like, not necessarily on the losing end of the argument, but I was the minority who insisted that I don't like that people act more as consumers than citizens, but if they're consumers, why don't we go there? So, not the sticker. Go and sell the bloody car. Go and divest. Be the consumer that you want to be. I know that Amazon will deliver in 24 hours. And that's the perfection that they did with the supply chain. But I also know that Amazon is not the best employer. And can I, as a consumer, think of 48 hours maybe with some other company that is better? Can I survive? Certainly I can. There are a lot of these micro decisions that can be the rose, but if they're combined, they actually will break the steam roller. So one thing is that we often, and a lot of these projects, they should continue doing, they talk to people as citizens, while actually most of humankind is consumers, regrettably so. Let's work with them as consumers. My other thing is, when I think about the thing, we liberals, we are so much immersed in education. And look, I've done many degrees, still to this very day, nothing wrong about education. I would choose it 100 times out of 100 times. But I will be fooling myself and you if I don't look out at the world and see that people do not want to be educated and want to be influenced. And this is something that one has to take into consideration. Not manipulated, influenced. And Salvatore spoke really eloquently about the political parties, especially those in the center right, that think that they can copy the radical right and say, oh, now we're going to take control of these systems. Let me tell you, as something that I do and I analyze the political systems, no mainstream right party managed to increase their votes, including in Germany and whatnot, by copying the radical right. Or no party has still a better platform of manipulating or lying to their potential voters and voters than the radical right. I don't think that that's the way. So I think what we have to think of influence as a mode of actually, not even a persuasion, as a mode of communication. Because now people, even if they're uneducated, they will say, no, who are you to educate me? And I think that's important. I also want to mention very briefly one of the key things that I see. We're not short of solutions. So many of your speakers talked about solutions. European Union actually has enough solutions. Not only in the civil society world. Look at the political world. EPP is just announcing their own paper on digital. Look at the green parties in the European Parliament. Honestly, if you just read their document, what should be their desired green policy, and implement that, we will be a totally different continent. I think what we have to focus is how to achieve that, and then also think about the power, the setting, the incentives, sometimes by contradicting it, by fighting it, sometimes by basically engaging with it. But I think we have to really focus on how to achieve that rather than what, because the what is already there. And I give you a food for thought. Yesterday and today, we talked about the digital ID. I mean, Salvatore is right to point out there are many companies that we will not trust. But I throw another teaser in your mind. Would you trust at this moment Meta more than the Spanish government with your data? In Germany, I would entrust German government more with my data than Meta and the Googles of this world. I'm not saying that it's perfect. It's a choice. Sometimes we have to think also of what's the lesser evil. And I want to conclude that we got carried away with the freedoms, which are good, they're ideal, but if we don't live in the ideal world, we have to look at what's the lesser evil. And I have to say, at this moment, I would empower rather the states than the corporations, because then the corporations have to change. And mind you, then also as consumers we will see, because if there is a verifiable ID, how many users do you think will be on Facebook and other platforms? You know, if the bots and everybody else who is not a real human is not there. And think also about all this money that I was speaking, what's the value that will go down? Now, I don't wish them that, but I also wish that they, A, treat me as a human with rights, they don't trade my data, and actually they allow for the democratic debate on those social platforms. And if they don't, then actually we have to have a democratic debate in the digital world that we deserve and our societies are ready for.
No doubts. This last reflection links with the key concept of this Empoder Alive Congress, the digital citizen sovereignty. How do you deal with this concept?
I mean, look, to me, digital sovereignty is actually not to be surveilled by my gadgets. You know, will I go in El Corte Inglés and then allow a camera to be on my shoulder? None of us will do that, but that's what's happening with us online. Second thing is also, we could be idealistic. I think we have all the blueprints, but we have to think also in terms of power. And in a way, I think at the moment, there's a lot to be said about how politicians are bad, and there are many bad politicians, but there are also some good politicians. I also think that we have to empower those. I also think that, there are very good civil servants across Europe in many governments. I think they're partners, and sometimes they're also as frustrated as we are, just that they cannot say it. And I believe that we have to work with that. I also think we have to embrace more the state. Not that I am I spend a lot of my work with human rights movements fighting states that were abusing power. I'm aware, I do not take that lightly. But I have to say at this moment, and the reason why I was talking about the money is also to think, if you think about all these trillions that are there, you could actually see that those trillions dwarf the billions of most of our economies. So actually, in a way, empowering the democratically elected officials means also empowering the weaker side in this monumental battle for us as I would say almost as human beings that want to inform themselves independently and want to create their own opinion.
I'm afraid, Goran, that our time is finishing. Not the time of democracy, but our time like as interviewers. I am sure that we can adjust one or two or perhaps three questions, please. Let's give the people the power. Let's give the people the word. There is a question in the last. Go ahead.
Hello. You say that we already have the solutions, but I don't see very much clear what are the solutions for the problem we have to keep the welfare of Europe taxing. I mean, nowadays, a bigger economy is data, and that's why Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc., are so valuable companies, etc. And at least in Spain, then they don't pay anything at all. And this logic will be even more complex to solve in the near future with AI. So what are the solutions for that? Because I don't see them yet.
Let's collect the questions. I will answer them at once to save on time.
Yes, we need more questions, and we'll make a answer for all of them. Yes. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm just going to talk about your experience in the European Union regarding education. You talk about education and that citizens now prefer to be influenced instead of be educated. In your experience within the European Union, do you think that European Union is thinking about to break with outdated, what I think is outdated education in all over Europe or maybe all over the world, and change it from the beginning or start again with an education updated to face up these all new challenges with not only with technology, artificial intelligence, and whatever new challenges. I don't know.
We have several subjects now. One third question, please. So many hands. It will be difficult to deal with this.
Hello, Goran. Thank you so much. I fully agree with your analysis of the history of Europe since 1945 and the collective and citizen impetus for liberal democracy. What do you think is the actual appetite of the Commission and the Union at this critical moment in history for investing in homegrown, locally European solutions to the problems and to the needs of our democracy?
One more question. It won't be easy for you. I guess it's a gorgeous debate. Next question, please.
You will have the coffee break to talk,
Yes. You have a lot of new friends here today, Goran.
Hello.
This is the last question.
The last question is very short.
Sorry.
Aren't you afraid that by giving the people more free thinking, could that lead to anarchy?
I think you should answer now, Goran.
Yeah.
If you dare.
No, it's not. Actually, it's a very reasonable fear. Because if you look at the populists, if you look at the radical right, and if you look at the opinions of a lot of people which are informed by conspiracy theory, you're like, oh, wait a second, now I want to have a deliberative democracy and sort of really put these things and amplify them. That's a very, very reasonable fear. Because, you know, how many of you these 2 days heard this, you know, garbage in, garbage out? You know, you can have a perfect machine, but it depends what you put inside. And you want to put a pluralistic opinion of people that have actually at least a bit thought through, or they can speak about their own experience and not the lie that they saw online. And I think that's really important. And I will tie it in with the question of education and influencing. This is not to say that education is bad. On the contrary, I'm a great believer in that. But if the sentiment is a rejection of you want to educate me and you want to tell me what's better, then it's difficult. And let's not forget, probably most of us are in those 40% of Europeans that own 38% of the wealth. So we are not part of those 50% that have the 4%. And actually, interestingly enough, when you think about that, you know, a lot of efforts are put towards the 50%, and they should continue. But actually, what made Europe strong, and to some extent different than the United States, was a very homegrown, very not only affluent materially, but also curious middle class. And I think we have to look at that middle class. To me, the key people to sort of influence and then later educate is this 40%. These are not the poorest people. These are actually people who have some, but also they see that those above them, the 10%, are really have departed, have skyrocketed. I mean, look, the Oxfam report, I really remind you, it's a very somber reading, but you know, the 3,000 billionaires have so much wealth that since 2015, their wealth increased by trillions, 7 trillion. I don't want to bore you with numbers. They're so big that nobody can even comprehend them. But you know what's important? That money is enough to end world poverty 22 times. Not once, not twice, 22 times. And I think this is where we have to think. And that's also where we have to think about the question of what if people are, you know, really coming with the, let's call it the garbage in, I cannot get garbage out. But I also have to say, we have to do listening. I like to in Open Society Foundations, I had this saying, please go where flat white with soya milk is not served. Because that means that you're outside of urban areas. And go there and listen. Even if there is a lot of things to suffer through, even if that you know that there is a conspiracy theorist. Actually, one of the things that we forgot is engagement. The other thing we forgot that throughout history and the part of the democratic history of Europe has been that different stratas could actually talk with each other, whether it's on the factory floor, the managers and the engineers with the workers. Even in Yugoslavia that you mentioned at the beginning, in the socialist country, it was a must. You go on the 1st of May, everybody should mingle because we are equal. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not fooling ourselves, but I'm thinking about engagement, and that's why actually even the progressive political, not only movements, but parties that are successful, they're successful in direct engagement, not necessarily online. And that I would argue before the engagement. Let me go with the other questions. And when I talk about influence and education, I work a lot with think tanks. I love work with think tanks, and I ask, there's this platform on thinktanks.org, really good, probably the best resource for knowledge on think tanks. Like, can you tell me one think tank that has successfully cracked down TikTok? That actually they have videos for people who they can understand something which is a complex thing, and they're popular. They have, if not hundreds of thousands, at least tens of thousands of views. They found one in Peru. I'm yet to find anybody in Europe. Look, I know these friends and colleagues there, they have probably 7 different arguments, 7 different facts, but people have bandwidth for one, and that video has to hammer one. Maybe they will be curious, then they will go to another video and go second, and probably 5% of them will have the curiosity and the stamina to go to the 7th argument. But start with one and accept that as a reality, even if you deeply intellectually believe, but wait a second, life is so complex, I have to explain it all. If the attention is not there, you've lost. And that's what I would like to talk. Now, one thing about the EU, because the appetite for those solutions, the short-term answer, what I see right now, is no. Whether there is a potential, absolutely. But that potential is really thinking critically. When you ask, what does it mean sovereignty, you have to ask, where is our money? Many of the pensions are in the US. They invested in the US. That would hurt. It would hurt because that market is making money. Whatever you do, it will hurt. And I'm not advocating for divestment. I'm just saying that you are exposed to that. If you have all the technology dependent, or vast majority dependent on US, we're talking now about hybrid threats. You know, and we talk about Russia and drones and whatnot, but of course people talk about hybrid threats in the cyberspace. What if you don't have those data centers? What if you don't have the browser? Because everything is in the US. You know, I don't know whether, once I worked in WeWork, We Can't Work, a company that failed. I mean, that was an office that we rented for short term in Berlin. And I asked, look, you're wasting too much energy. Can you switch off the lights on the 19th floor? And they told me, oh, we were in Berlin. They told me, wait a second, we have to call London because that's controlled from London. Because that's our European headquarters. think about this. Can we say, oh, where are data centers? Sorry, Houston or Los Angeles or Silicon Valley, can you switch on the lights so for us to operate? And in a short term, that would cost. But in a long term, that means that you have the switch, if not next to you, you have it in Paris, or you have it in Berlin, or you have it in Madrid, but you have it closer and you have it within a union. In order to do that, I think people have to acknowledge what's the pain in the short term that we have to do. And also there is a very big acknowledgement, especially among the big countries, to admit to themselves that alone they cannot solve it. Because European interest still does not exist. There is German, Spanish, French, and they think that they can get away. My humble opinion is that we are past that point, and I would rather trust the neighbor on this continent than somebody who is far away. And in that respect, I think in mid to long term, I'm actually an optimist. I see, and I'm optimist not only because of the politicians, I'm optimist because I believe that civil society, whatever is left from independent media, should really push for this and not let it go. And sometimes we have to hold these rich people accountable. Other times we have to see who is really eager to invest. You know, I worked for a guy who could have actually built a rocket, bought a football club and whatnot. He decided to put all of his wealth into furthering the cause of open society. You know? Okay, not perfect. We know how he made the money, but much better than having Chelsea Football Club or alike. So I think also, you know, this money are not necessarily bad money, and one has to put both the public and also the private and push in that direction. I think then we will be able to move on.
Okay, Goran, our time is past. It was a privilege to listen to you. Now, friends, now you know what are some of the reflections that feed one of the main think tank in Europe. It was a privilege, really, and I am very grateful, thanks in my name and in the name of Cibervoluntarios Foundation, for visiting us, for sharing with us your reflections and knowledge. So thanks a lot. Bye, friends.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.